Yes, that is correct, folks. I'm going to be interviewing the Metal Gear Rising Revengeance composer, Jamie Christopherson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Jack.
Same, you're welcome. So, I suppose the first question I'd like to get on to with you today is how did you actually get into music?
Wow. I guess that's the short answer is I was born into it. My dad was a rock and roll bass player. My mom was musical. And so my dad's bands, they moved out to LA in pursuit of the 70s rock and roll, stardom on Sunset Boulevard. And that's where I was born in LA. So I was, born here in the entertainment industry, and just growing up here, I was surrounded by, artistic people, all the time, a few other composers on our blocks and things like that. And so I was always surrounded by it and I always loved any kind of music. So there you go.
Yeah. And what actually led you into sort of creating scores, whether that be for games or films or TV, etc.?
What led me into that is just an appreciation, a fan of finally putting like two and two together of wow, this movie's awesome. Like, what is that music going on behind it? And realizing at some point that was a job that someone could do. So I was like fascinated with it from pretty early age, probably like, 10 or 11 years old.
And how do you actually like approach a score when you're making like a score for whatever you're working on?
That depends on the project. So if it's a film, video game, a trailer, whatever, obviously it's all music, but as far as our approaches for them, I have, a computer set up here. I also have a mobile rig that I use sometimes. So the process, I guess, is similar in regards to just making the music, but I do like to change things up on projects as far as, field recordings or, writing a theme first, or just coming up with cool textures, things like that. It's really kind of fluid.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you've done a variety of scores that many people know you for. Some don't. Like one that I feel not a lot of people know you for, but know the tracks and know the stuff you've done, is the Samsung music, specifically Over the Horizon. So what was it like making your own rendition of basically the main theme of Samsung?
Yes, that was cool because Samsung came to me because their friends at Capcom had recommended them to me, because I'd at that time done a few games with Capcom, like Onimusha, Dawn of Dreams, and I think Lost Planet 1, or maybe both of them. So that was cool, and I felt like, or at least they were looking at the time, they were looking for the Hollywood sound, right? So that kind of gave me a leg up, because I did live in Hollywood. Everyone kind of knew that, and it was before a lot of the bigger Hollywood composers were doing the crossover. Because I started really in games, my professional career, and so I think that was just a fortunate time and place, and so I felt very fortunate that Samsung just called me, wrote me out of the blue one day, and they were like, "Oh, we got recommended to you, and we're doing new Over the Horizon theme." And I was an iTunes user and still am, or an Apple user. Don't tell them that, but I have appreciation for all phones. So I wasn't really familiar with the theme, but they quickly, brought me up to speed, and it had been already through a few iterations at that point. But it's like a very, very nice, like 6-note theme that they have, and so then the trick was like, how do we take that 6-note theme and make a whole orchestral and rock arrangement out of it that's like 3 minutes long? Because it is a challenge, just take that without getting too monotonous, too repetitive, and so that was the main challenge, but also the main fun.
Yeah, without a doubt, and it turned out really good. A lot of people have heard it, millions, in fact. And there's also some film editor music that you've done, so like little pieces of music, and they'll just throw it into the default film editor. Or was it like making those shorter tracks? Was it like, did they give you like a sort of...
Well,
name?
I've never been able to find those tracks. Do they exist like on the phones, or how did you even know that?
So when I was researching for this interview, there was listening to one of the tracks that you put up. It was one of the Samsung ones, and I played it, and I went, "Hang on a minute, that's the film editor's action music, but longer." I was like, "Oh my god!" And I remember it because like I used to use that film editor just to make like a little funny little videos or whatever. And like 5 years ago, I used one of the pieces in the film editor, and it was one of your pieces.
There you go.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's so cool that you heard it, because I never used that little app, and I don't know if they still use those anymore. But we did maybe like 6 of them or something. There was the action, and there was like the home video, kind of like just kind of more light, and then there was romantic one, things like that. I even did a disco one, so I guess like a party disco, which is super fun, 70s.
As well as that, you've also done some video games, as most people know you for, but there's been like ones that you've done, kind of like franchise sort of ones, like the Lord of the Rings and Spider-Man and Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that. What was it like doing sort of those big franchise, big film franchise video game spin-off sort of soundtracks?
Yeah, it is. A lot of them are tied into the music that's already established, right, in the franchises. In terms of each one's a little different. So, like for example, Lord of the Rings, they licensed some of the original tracks from the movies for the game, but then for the additional stuff that I wrote, I wasn't allowed to use the themes. So I had to come up with new themes, new thematic material based on the sound, right, of Lord of the Rings, and based on. So I really studied like, Howard Shore's score a lot. Obviously I was a big fan of the films, but I just really dove into like how he's approaching the compositions and the harmonies and things like that. And so that was really fun, because then just taking that and building new themes, and there was a few new characters like goblins, and we really got to dive into like the elves culture more, things like that, dwarves. And then like the Spider-Man game I did, that was all new material. So just basically in that world, but it wasn't tied to a movie or anything.
And you also made some sort of music for Fortnite as well. So what was it like making music for, right now, one of the biggest games out there?
Yeah, that was fun. I did mainly, they had like a World Cup, I think. So it was like, one of those massive competitions. And so they brought me in to do the music for that. But then I think they liked the music enough to get into the game. So then they, after that, kind of put it into the game, and I'm happy it did. Yeah. So that was fun. And I did a few other like trailers for them for some Halloween stuff and things like that. It's a cool game.
And one of your earlier video games that some people often bring up is a game called Toontown that you did. Very kiddie sounding soundtrack. What was it like making that piece of music? Because I believe all of that was MIDI.
Yeah. So number one is I was brought in a little later to that project, and there's probably at least 7, 8, maybe 10 other composers involved with that. And so people are trying to pick out like who did what, and so I was just one of the composers on that. Yeah, I did a bunch of music, but I don't even remember which ones anymore. It's like so long ago. But yeah, it was general MIDI, and it was basically a web game, right? So it would just use the MIDI from whatever web browser people were using. Because I don't know if you know, but in music there's a thing called general MIDI, and so it's like 127 channels of music instruments. So like, I don't even know if this is right, but like say channel 7 is like piano, so you'd assign channel 7, and whatever platform that people are streaming the music or playing the game on, it will just trigger whatever sound that is, piano sound. It could be terrible, it could be good. So the sound quality is all over the place with general MIDI.
Oh yeah. With my own experience of it, I can tell, because like I tried, like I was actually composing some general MIDI music for like this sort of game thing, and like, oh my god, like sometimes it would sound really good on some sorts of MIDIs, and then some of it would be like, that sounds trash.
Yeah. There's no control. We don't have any control over it. So
No, no. And you also mentioned there that you don't actually remember some of the pieces that you made for Toontown. I was actually going to ask you a little bit about that because you've made so many soundtracks over the years. Do you actually forget the pieces that you made quite often? Like, where you listen to one and go, oh, wait, that was me?
sometimes I get tricked. Yeah. Sometimes I forget, or someone will play me something. I'm like, that's pretty cool. What is that? It was like, something you did. I'm like, really? I don't remember. Okay. But yeah, I do like to work a lot and jump around projects, and I'm not one of those guys that remembers every single music note that they've ever written, for sure. Once it's like out of my brain, it's like kind of gone in a way.
But one that will keep coming back to you and back to you and back to you, I believe, is Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. It has just kind of taken a resurgence in the last few months, and like, there's people I know who are playing it, myself included, having a blast in it and everything. What was it? How did you actually get into the Metal Gear Rising soundtrack, and what was it like making the music for that?
That one is like, it's so in depth and so much to tell about it. But basically, I was at a company called Sound Deluxe, and I was working with them on they were hired for a lot of games. I was their like in-house composer basically at the time. So just a call kind of came in one day, like, hey, do you know how to write rock music? Like, there's this trailer that came in for this game, and I was like, the standard response from any composer is yeah, and then you figure out how to do it. In this case, I people think that I never wrote any rock or heavy metal before Metal Gear Rising, and to an extent it's true that I didn't write metal per se, but I did write rock and hard rock. Like, I was in some rock bands growing up, and like I said, my dad was a rock and roll bass player, so it's kind of it was kind of in my blood, and I listened to a lot of Metallica and stuff growing up, and a lot of other metal bands and things like that. But I had never written like a full game or anything like that. So so we did this trailer for what turned out to be Metal Gear Rising, and the clients really liked my direction on it, and then we decided to pursue that and go further.
And what sort of made it become, because it is a metal soundtrack in the Metal Gear game, but what made it sort of become like an electronic metal sort of soundtrack? Because it's a very unique sort of style that you don't really hear often in metal music.
Yeah, I think it started off at one place, and then we just kept adding and going crazier with it. The more that we liked the direction. So there was always going to be, electronic elements in the thing, like in Metal Gear Solid, right? There's always futuristic kind of stuff, right? So that kind of fits into the universe. But just the more and more we got into the game, we realized that since the gameplay was so crazy, that it could allow for, the music to be even equally as crazy. And so we were tweaking with the soundtrack basically up until the day of release, or until we had to release it to the publisher. But yeah, so things just kind of got added. I would say that at one point we decided to do like remixes, and the remixes are actually the songs that ended up in the game. And so they brought in like Maniac Agenda, and then they also did some remixes on their own. And so basically they did a lot of adding synthesizers on top of what we already had, and then sending them back to me in stems. And then I would kind of decipher like how that fit into the song, and, when to showcase certain things. But so by the end, we just had, I don't know, hundreds of tracks in there. So that's why it sounds like that. It just sounds like the kitchen sink. And so it was a tricky mix to get all of them to blend together and hear these elements, but it is everything in there.
Yeah, and it managed. You managed, and it did turn out pretty good. And it also turned out very immersive as well. Like, it would, depending on where you'd be in the game. It would sort of change the way the score sort of sounded. How did that sort of immersive soundtrack get into the game? Because it's really incorporated very well into that soundtrack.
Yeah, that's a huge kudos to Platinum Games. So they had their internal sound team, and I believe they're using WY's game engine, which is like a middle software audio tool for people to use in game development. And so they're all to given the credit for when rules of nature kicks in, like when the sword is coming down. Like that's all them. I didn't code that myself. They coded that internally. And so they had like my access to a ton of my stems and things like that. And so they could build, fuller song arrangements and when to trigger things exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of rules of nature, I'd like to actually speak a little bit about a couple of the tracks that some people I know like and some that I like. One of them being Rules of Nature, the one that everyone hears first in the game. I believe that was originally called Locked and Loaded. So what was that all about? How did you make that particular track?
Yeah, the Locked and Loaded one that you hear online, that was leaked by someone. I don't know who it was, but it was leaked at some point. The whole original demos, basically, with the original demo singers and things like that. So that was it was just some early ideas. And so we just kept honing things in as we went. It was a natural progression. We did take a while to get the songs to the final stages.
And one that I particularly like is A Stranger I Remain. It's one of my favorites in the soundtrack. I just think everything of that just sort of blends in so well. The vocalist, the music in general. What was it like making that particular track there?
Yeah, that one was fun because it's only female vocal, right, on the soundtrack. And she was kind of seductive and French, or at least French speaking. And so we try to incorporate a little. That's why you hear like piano and a little bit more delicacy into a metal song, which is hard to do, but we tried to do that. And so yeah, that's why that one sounds a little bit different.
Yeah, and it turned out very good. And a personal favorite of a lot of people at the moment, one that's kind of resurging up, is a song called Red Sun in the game. Very popular one. What was it like making that particular one? It's very, very metal sounding track, that one.
Yeah, it's very, I think that one it's interesting because originally we had like the vocals going to be sung up an octave. And when we got into the studio, we realized that they were too high for the singer, he's a very great singer, Jason, but they're at the top of his range. And we were like, oh, what if you just sing it down an octave and like just go a little bit beefier with it? And the second we heard it, we were like, oh yeah, this is like, okay. And then we switched the song to match his vocals a little bit. So we just made it a little bit beefier. I don't think that the whole art was done for Sundowner at that point. So, there was some concept stuff, but yeah, it turned out very well. And so, bands like Rammstein and things like that, so like kind of Euro, very heavy, powerful metal kind of stuff, like kind of came into our heads. When I say like I co-wrote that song with Logan Mader, who's a metal guy. And we did a lot of these things that you're, talking about. And so we were in the studio tracking all these vocals together.
Gee, and it turned out very well, Red Sun, especially the deepened vocal. That kind of makes the song very unique sounding compared to the rest of them in its own way.
Exactly.
And as well as that, one of the ones that's also a big fan favorite is The Only Thing I Know for Real. How is that one made? Because that's like a lot of people are just quoting lyrics from that and everything.
Yeah, that one seems to have kind of come out of nowhere as like a fan popular favorite, which is great. We pushed the singer Tyson just like really to the limit, as far as like raspiness and attitude, and so that was fun. And then we got the kind of Asian flutes in there and things like that. We tried to give all the tracks a little bit of personality that within the metal universe, right? So I don't know what to say about the lyrics to that one in particular, but people do seem to like it.
Yeah, yeah, and two that people seem to like very much is the Senator Armstrong tracks, Collective Consciousness, and It Has to Be This Way. Very similar lyrically, but very different melodically and rhythm-wise. So what was it like making those two sort of tracks? Because they're crazy, but very good.
Yeah, so we knew that there was like going to be these two songs for the final, and so like how can we make one different from the other, and the progression of like where that was going to go in terms of the boss battle. So I don't remember which one we wrote first, but I knew that It Had to Be This Way. It was going to be just massive, like throw the whole orchestra at it. It had to just be very epic, right? And almost like a rock opera in a way. So, or a heavy metal opera. That's what I kind of have come to kind of look at the soundtrack as, almost like an opera in a way.
Yeah, and it worked so well, especially when you had that grand finale of a song like It Has to Be This Way, and then you're rewarded with such a brilliant song for a credits theme, The War Still Rages Within. What led to the creation of that sort of soundtrack? Because it's really well implemented into the game. It's just, you feel like you've accomplished something when you listen to that.
Oh, thanks. I think it's the only like right slow song that we have. Obviously, it's the end credit, and Metal Gear franchise has a great long history of, kind of that style of song, in credit, kind of James Bond type of songs. They've taken that inspiration, and so I wanted to do something like that, but in our universe, and tying in the main theme that I had kind of established, the orchestral theme. And so, yeah, it was fun. I think it was the last song we wrote as well. So,
what a good one to end off with.
Yeah, it's very non-traditional structure as well. I think a lot of these songs are, but that one in particular, like, there's no like chorus. The chorus is like yelling, and it goes into this double time, and then it does like several instrumental breaks, and then it goes into like a bridge, and the chorus never comes back, or the yelling chorus or something.
No, like that. There's no chorus in that, but it's really good. It's really well made. It's kind of like a score track in a way. It's sort of like movements, and they all connect together into this one piece.
Exactly, and I like that about the song, that you don't really know where it's going to go, but yeah, connects.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I'd like to ask you about relating to the track "A Soul Can't Be Cut," and the reason why I want to ask you about it is because there's a different vocalist in the DLC version, and I was wondering why that was, because I found that quite interesting.
You're the first person to pick that up, really, or in a long time. Yeah, we did record that song with two vocalists, and for that reason, that we knew that it was going to be from a different perspective, right? Because it was, I believe you fight as Jetstream Sam, right, in the DLC.
Yeah.
So I don't know why we decided that, but we decided that, keep that song, but have a different vocalist sing it. So there are two versions. I forget. It's A Soul Can't Be Cut, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kit is the one who's on the soundtrack. So then I guess I haven't even looked for it in a while, but on YouTube, probably the other version is available.
Yeah, it is, and I believe it was also Tyson Yen that did the DLC version, who does Jetstream Sam's theme. Did you sort of like choose the vocalists based on the characters? So like there'd be like a character, and then you choose, oh yeah, here's the vocalist. They're the singer for that character.
Yeah, definitely. We gave the client Platinum like a few options, and basically internally probably with Konami or whatever, they chose basically who they wanted. So that's who ended up singing those songs.
As well as that, during this time, you also got to meet Hideo Kojima, the man himself. What was it like meeting one of the most, basically the Steven Spielberg of video games?
Yeah, he was very cool. He's great. I think it was like an E3 show, and he's very kind to let me come back and talk to him for a little bit. Yeah. It is great. I mean, yeah, I'm a huge fan of his work in video games for sure. So it was, I would say it would be daunting, but I was just at that point I was just so excited about the game coming out and meeting him, and also proud of like what we had done. So it was great.
Oh yeah, yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, there's been like a resurgence in Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, especially in the meme factor of things. Have you seen any of the memes relating to the music or anything? And if so, what do you think of them?
I mean, it's hard to. Yes, that's why we're kind of talking here, right? Is because I think the memes are what, at least half of what brings us here, or if not most of it. The other half being that they re-released like updated version of it on Steam. The game, I think, also helps, and things like that. But yeah, the memes, I do check them out from time to time, or someone will send me something crazy, and I half understand them, and other, I get the standing here, I realize kind of thing, where he's just punching Armstrong like furiously, and then there's a few other memes I just don't get.
Yeah, same with myself. But there was one that I found. I'm not sure if you heard it. Did you hear the one called Collective Christmas?
Yes, I actually did hear that one. I thought it was pretty inventive. Yeah, it's just weird, disturbing, like, but also it somehow worked. I don't know how.
Yeah, when I heard that, for those that don't know, it's a mashup of Collective Consciousness and All I Want for Christmas Is You. It is so good. When I heard it, like, honestly, I want to play that at a Christmas event, just unironically, just to throw people off.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how it works, and yeah, it's just it got a surreal kind of quality to it, right?
Yeah, and another surreal version of the soundtrack that someone did. They did like a kazoo version of the Metal Gear Rising soundtrack. Really? Did you hear that?
I have not heard that one.
All right, we're changing that today. You are going to hear 10 seconds of Rules of Nature done on a kazoo. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Here you go. And the whole soundtrack's there. It's done by this dude called the Real Honk Master. And if I look at the comments,
that's funny.
Jason Charles Miller, who sung on the song, commented on it.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I think my favorite thing that people are doing with the songs, because a lot of like real metal people have been covering it, which is awesome to hear them trying to figure it out and play it live. I love that stuff. Number one. And then I also love where they turn the songs into like Nintendo versions or 16-bit versions, and to hear, because I was a big Nintendo and Genesis player growing up, and so to hear my music like in that style and it works like really well is like really cool.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. That's pretty much everything I have to say about Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. We could probably talk all day about it, but there's other things you've done. A soundtrack similar to Metal Gear Rising that you've done was a soundtrack called Blade and Soul. What was it like making the music for that?
Yeah, I would say they called me up pretty quickly after Metal Gear. So it's kind of like the Metal Gear, had a baby, and those 5 or 6 songs that I did are very closely related in as far as like metal, not as far as like lyric content, but they're very, I would say they're similar, some of them, as far as the approach to hardcore metal and stuff. So those are fun.
Has there been any other games that you've composed on that I may have not mentioned that you'd like to highlight?
I mean, yeah, I've been involved with Warhammer 3, and so that came out a few months ago, and I did a ton of music for that, and we're all really proud about that, and seem to have gotten like good reviews. So, that's the other. I've done a lot of fantasy music, right? So it's fun for me to go into those fantasy worlds, big orchestras and choirs and things like that. And so, yeah.
You've also made some music for movies as well. What's the sort of difference between making like music for a video game and making music for a film?
Well, obviously the the film is like a one-time event, right? So you're just composing to what's on the screen, as opposed to a video game. Usually, it's interactive and adaptive music, right? So you have to approach it in a way where it can loop, and people will get too bored, or break it down into stems that can change constantly, things like that. So yeah, the technology is a lot more involved in video games, and the concept of what can be done. So yeah, in that regards, it is more complicated in a way, but you have less control over specific moments, other than what you mentioned earlier. If you have someone implementing these things correctly, then you, like rules of nature, for example, you can create that moment for the player, and that's why video game engines are so great, But I don't have control exactly when that player is going to trigger that, but you do through the technology. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. There's actually one film I'd actually like to highlight of the films that you worked on. And the only reason why is because I actually heard a YouTuber that I follow review this movie and give it a decent praise and everything. That's a film called Lady Driver. So what was it like making the soundtrack for that particular film?
Nice. That one's on Netflix. And it's a really, really great little film. It's kind of, in the back catalog of Netflix. So you have to search for it. But interestingly, the lead actress in that is, if you saw Stranger Things, she plays Chrissy in Stranger Things, season 4, the new season. So yeah, she's great. And Grace Van Dien, who's actually Casper Van Dien's daughter. I'm just going off on tangents here. He was from Starship Troopers and blah blah blah. Fanning out here. Anyway, working on that movie. It's a race car movie, but it has a lot of heart, and so. But her character is kind of like very like teen angst, and she likes to listen to punk music and stuff like that. So there are a lot of guitars in the soundtrack, and but more like punk guitars, chunky kind of stuff. So it's fun. I'm a big fan of doing all kinds of rock and bringing orchestra, rock, jazz, all those things together in the scores. It's fun sometimes. So.
And you've also made some music for TV shows, I believe. What sort of TV shows have you made music for?
Yeah, so I've mostly done, for TV shows, I've mostly been like an additional composer. So, or someone to come in and help the main composer so far. So, but I've worked on shows like Ray Donovan, Homeland, things like that. What else? The Affair. I worked on The Affair a little bit. And then I have a ton of I've worked on a ton of other things, but just as like additional music. So it's fun. I haven't, as of yet, had my own show. But I do like working in the TV world for sure.
I believe you've also done some audio design as well for stuff. So what sort of things did you do audio design for, like recording audio for things?
Well, I started when I first got back to LA after grad school. I started off at a sound effects company. So I was kind of working on some sound effects collections, recording field audio, things like that. And yeah, that was kind of my way. I met some composers, and I got into what is called musical sound design, which is basically designing unique sounds for composers, which is definitely a thing, because we're always looking for something fresh, a new sound to kind of pique the ear and be personalized to projects. So I've always been into sound design, musical sound design since then. And so I don't use it that often anymore, but I did for the third Samsung Over the Horizon, I did all the sound design for that. It's their Nature one, 2020, that I did. And so designs like a lot of nature sounds and incorporated them into the score and things like that. So that was cool.
And I've heard a little birdie has told me that you actually contributed a little bit to Tom Cruise's new Top Gun movie. Is that true? Have you done anything on that?
Not the movie, the promotional campaigns. So I did a little bit of work and help with my friends recording some jets that made their way into the promotional campaigns for that. So that was fun.
That's pretty cool. And what was actually your favorite score to make out of all the scores you've ever done? I know that's probably a very hard question for you to answer, but like,
yeah, it is hard one to answer, but I would say like probably the favorite film that I've worked on is one called American Wrestler, and it's about like an Iranian boy that comes over during the 80s, kind of tumultuous time that was going on there, and he comes to the US and he joins the like high school wrestling team. So it's a sports drama with like a cultural element, and it's really well done, and I'm super proud of it. And yeah, check it out. I think it's on HBO maybe or Amazon. I'm not sure which one it is on right now. They're changing around, but yeah, I'm proud of that one.
Yeah. And what was it like your favorite piece of music that you may have made, whether that be from any other score or even that one?
Yeah, no, I don't. Gosh, I don't really have one favorite piece of music that I've written. I get bored of my music once I write it. So
Really?
yeah, I'm always looking for something exciting and new and a different approach to music. I don't want to keep repeating myself. So, but as far as a particular piece of music, it's hard to say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because I've never really heard anyone say in like an interview with me that they get kind of bored of their music. Like I actually was interviewing someone like a month ago, and they heard like a bit like yourself, kind of forgot that they wrote a piece of music. They listened back to it and were like, yeah, that was pretty good.
But you've heard I mean, I'm not saying that I don't watch my music, in films. Like I do that, but you hear of like actors who don't watch their own movies when they, after they film them. I'm not quite like that. I will watch my movies, but when I'm working on a movie, I'm watching it hundreds of times and working on the music just, over and over and over again. So when I say bored, I think while I'm in it, it's like very exciting. But then when I'm done with it and on to another project, it's like, yeah, I've been there, done that like hundreds of times. Like, maybe at some point I'll listen to it in the future and be like, oh yeah. And then I'm reminded of like the fun experience that I did working on it. But yeah, it's when I say I get bored of my own music, it's like I just always want to reinvent how I approach music.
Yeah, and I wouldn't blame you on that. It makes the music more varied, and like people will then listen to other pieces of music and go, "You did that too." And you mentioned as well that you watch the movies that you did the score for. Do you actually play the video games that you do the score for as well?
I try when I can. They're just very time consuming, so I'll play them to a point, and then and then I got to get back to work. But no, I mean I do love video games and things like that. So yeah, so I'll try when I can.
Well, Jamie, I'm just going to let you know that you are the second person to ever say to me who works on video games that they actually play video games.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did grow up as a gamer, so I am a big video game, like a real fan for sure. Like, and I just don't have as much time, unfortunately, as I used to have when I was a kid.
Yeah, but like you still are like one of the exceptions, because most of the people I interview, none of them have played the games. They wouldn't be able to tell you what even happens to them.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, I always used to think that if you want to be a game composer, you should know how to play video games and love playing video games. Just like if you want to be a movie composer, you should love watching movies and listening to film music scores. So I feel like, yeah, the composer should at least know how a game engine works. Like you got to know how, play some video games, see how they trigger these things in the games, see what's possible. Like know that at least.
Yeah. Well, with that, we could be here all day, but I know you got other things to do. So, Jamie, thank you very much for coming on. Is there any sort of last things you'd like to say? And do you want to plug in the socials?
No, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for all the fans that are keeping Metal Gear Rising, popular. And my hope is, through Metal Gear, to introduce people to not only some of my music, but some other styles of music as well. So like people that love metal, like come to my channel and hear like the jazz I've done or the classical, and see how it's all like interconnected, which is just music in general. Good music is good music. So, but yeah, I do have an official YouTube now, which I'm just starting to understand YouTube a little bit more, and I will be trying to post things in the near future, and this with Metal Gear and other stuff. And I just started a record label called Coda Wave Records with the intent to release a lot of my unreleased film and maybe even game scores down the line. So yeah, stay tuned, because I'm going to be releasing a lot of music soon. All
right, well, you better subscribe to Jamie's channel, and you can find me simply on my YouTube channel, Jack Lucas Caffrey. You may already be on there if you're listening to this interview on YouTube. But Jamie, thank you very much for coming on. And is there any sort of last track that you'd like to finish out with?
A last track? No. I mean, I get the request that Hot Wind Blowing should be on Spotify, but I guess people need to write to Konami for that, because I don't have control.
Shall we end it off with that then?
Yeah, go for it.
All right then, the Hot Wind Blowing is coming up next. And Jamie, thank you very much for coming on. And yes, I will speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jack.